All right, engine manual for Operation Fairbanks Morse diesel and electric locomotives. Fairbanks Morse and Company, manufacturer, Chicago, Illinois. The engine man's manual Fairbanks Morse diesel electric locomotive, 200 horsepower class, Pennsylvania Railroad Bulletin 1409. Fairbanks Morse and Company, manufacturer, Chicago, Illinois. Table of Contents, Section 1, Description, General Locomotive Control Stand, Operating Handles indicated with Equipment Transition, Dynamic Braking, Section 104, Locomotive Operation, Preliminary Operation, Starting Engine, Putting Engines on the Line, Preparing for the mode of moving the locomotive, Pumping up the train line, Starting the train, Forestalling, Automatic Transition, Special Instruction, Operating of the Manual Transition, Stopping and Reducing Locomotive Speed, Dynamic Braking, Stopping Engines, Emergency Operating Precautions, Changing Operating Cab, Leaving Locomotive Rerailing, Towing Locomotive Dead in Train, Periodic inspection on road, summary of operation precautions, electrical precautions, operating with one motor cut out, operating with one unit cut out, diesel engine cautions, operating with reduced diesel engine output, freezing weather precautions. List of illustrations, control compartment agreement, control panel, fireman's position, engine generator set of the 200 horsepower diesel electric road locomotive unit, the control end inside, engine general set of 2,000 horsepower diesel electric road locomotive unit opposite, control end engine side. Engine control end inside, engine control panel, loading, braking indicator, operating cab, reverse selector, throttle position, selector handle latching, side view, speed transition indicator, traction motor connection, selector handle position 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Alright, section 101. Section 101, General, the Fairbanks Morse OP and diesel electric road locomotive exists for the 2,000 horsepower unit that are coupled together, operated with the multiple of the units for the design designated with A and B. Each A unit has an operating cab equipped with the controls necessary to operate with the locomotive. The B unit has no cab but furnished with a holster control, which unit can be moved independently. And if for example of the control equipment of the AB and the unit is essential with the same that contained with the 2,000 horsepower Fairbanks Morse motor operation diesel engine with a diesel operating diesel engine main electrical generator exciter, two auxiliary generators, and air compressor. The main generator supplies the direct current for the four traction motors, which are geared to the wheel axle. The two traction motors are located with each of the truck and are geared with leading and the trailing part pair of the wheel. The middle of the wheel set is each six-wheel truck as an idler. Each of the locomotive units is self-contained. Operates as a separate power plant under the control of the leading A unit with the wires necessary for the control of the train line from the unit to the unit by the removable cable the jumpers which carry low voltage electricity only. If necessary, one of the unit may be cut out with the operation continue with the remaining units. B. Locomotive controls. General. The following are listed locomotive controls. There are four manual operation. These are for more manual operation unless otherwise noted. Nearly all fuses have been eliminated, for this equipment and circuit breakers are used instead. The exception is the 300 amp fuse and the 250 volt auxiliary generator circuit. The circuit breaker also the function of the manually operated switch of the various circuit with the automatic tripling overload indicated with the position of the handling with the midway between off and on. To reset after the trip of the operating handle with the trigger that's pressed down to the off and snapped upward on the on. Panel instruments are marked with a fluorescent lacquer which glows under the black illumination light from the lighthouse, enabling the cab to be kept in the darkness of the night. The intensity of the black light is adjusted by means rheostat incorporated with the engaged with light off and on switch. Illustration 1. The engine and generator set of the 200 horsepower diesel electric road locomotive control end inside. Illustration 2, engine generator with a 200 horsepower diesel electric road locomotive opposite control inside. 3, illustration of the cab. Alright, 1, sun visor, 2, windshield wiper motors, 3 defroster openings, 4 conductor's valve, 5 the windshield wiper control valve, 5 6 door to hood, 7 the control stands, 8 the fire alarm warning light, 9 whistle pull cord, 10 hot engine indicating light red, light red. Low loop oil indication light yellow. Attendant call button the headlight circuit control breaker 12. 14 headlight bright and dim switch 15. 14 15 order light switch. 16 emergency engine stop button with 17 engine train and signal whistle with the gauge light switch for the rheostat. 19 heater switch for rheostat. 20, defroster switch and rheostat. 21, generator field switch. 22, windshield wiper control valve. 23, load braking indicator. 23, 4, trans speed transition indicator. 25, brake warning light white, main equalizing reservoir gauge. 26, 27, brake cylinder, brake pipe gauge. 27, 28, wheel slip indicator light. 29, selector position window. 30, throttle position window. 31, wheel slip warning buzzer. 32, throttle handle. 33, rotator valve. 34, air brake single whistle. 35, automatic brake valve. 36, automatic brake handle. 37A, control circuit breaker. 37B, cab signal circuit breaker. 37C, fuel pump circuit breaker. 38, reverse handle. 39, selector handle. 40, independent brake valve handle. Independent brake valve. 41, bell ringer valve. 42, acknowledging switch. 43, cab heater. 44, safety control foot pedal. 45, first surface cook. For first surface cock. 46, equalizing position portion. 47, seat stands. 48, footrest. 49, water cooler. 50, cab signal valves and loudspeakers. 52, cab signals. Engineer position C, illustration 3, with the control stand operating handle, the reverse handle for the control of the direction of the locomotive of the movement. Throttle handle, which controls the locomotive speed and the power. Selector, which moves to the left from the off position. The manual transmission to take the right from the off position to apply with the dynamic brake. Circuit breakers with the control stand, headlight, circuit breaker with the control, circuit with the breaker with the cab signal, circuit breaker with the fuel pump, circuit breaker with the switch and push button with the control stand panel. Order light switch with the headlight bright and the dim switch with the inner field switch, the gauge light switch with the rheostat, heater switch from the rheostat, the defroster switch with the rheostat, attending to the call button, engine stop for all engines. Warning lights, the control stand on the front panel, hot engine red, low oil pressure yellow, fire alarm warning red, white slip indicator white, dynamic row brake overload white, over other control devices, control stand wheel slip warning buzzer with the illuminated dial for the control. Other window shape wiper control valve to indicate instrument in the front panel left to right. The load braking indicator, speed transition indicator, main equalizing reservoir gauge, maker cylinder brake pipe gauge, safety control pedal, H air brake equipment, automatic brake valve handle. Cocks on automatic brake valve, double heading cock, safety controls, cutout cock, first release selector, cutout cock 4, first surface cutout cock, independent brake valve handle, rotary valve, the miscellaneous controls, dome light switch, bell ringer, the valve, the horn valve cords. All right, J, train phone control the equipment loudspeaker with the handset with the push to the talk button, the calling signal lever, there's a communication channel frequency signal lever, selector lever, power control, power contactor control switch, volume control knobs, noise suppressor control knobs, control 3, control the fireman position C, illustration 3 and 4 with the headlight heater switch with the rheostat, defroster switch, rheostat, hose light switch, classification light switch, number light switch, windshield wiper control valve. Also, illustration 4 shows 1 as the defroster switch, rheostat, 2, the hood light switch, 3, the classification light switch, 4, the number of the light switch, 5, heater switch, rheostat. Over here you have illustration 5, engine control panel. 1 is the engine tachometer. 2, the ground relay tripped indicating light. 3, boiler flame out indicating light blue not used. 4, lube oil pressure gauge. 5, low oil pressure indicating light yellow. 6, fuel oil pressure gauge. 7, hot engine indicating light red. 8, engine control switch. 9, fuel pump switch. Alright. 4, circuit breaker is the nose of the cab, with the heater with the defroster, circuit breaker with the fire alarm, with the circuit breaker with the control for the engine room, control of the engine for the power plane, with the regulator located with the pump at the end of the engine, right side of the locomotive fuel injection pump, cutout located with the fuel control rod, inside of the injection nozzle compartment on each side of the cylinder, emergency stop push button with the overspeed governor, reset lever for the foul rack, fuel rack indicator above the power plant, regulators. 3, B, the switch gauge for the instrument engine control panel, C, illustration 5, with located at the right side of the locomotive, opposite engine, and fuel pump switch, engine control switch, engine tachometer, lube oil pressure gauge, fuel oil pressure gauge, indicating lights for the engine control panel, top of the panel, gray round relay tripped white, lube oil, low lube oil pressure yellow, hot engine red, automatic switch for the engine control panel behind the lower cover with the regulator, oil pressure of the GLP with the engine water and start temperature switch for the WTS, the engine oil temperature switch, OTS switches of the circuit breaker with the control compartment of the panel located with the general end of the engine. Illustration 6, control compartment light switch with engine roll light, room light switch 2 with the 2 light circuit breaker with all lights 2, voltage regulating relay circuit breaker, battery voltmeter control circuit breaker with the negative, the control circuit breaker with the positive, the auxiliary generator circuit breaker, the radiator fan speed with the control switch. 7. Switching the circuit breaker to the right side of the control compartment behind the engineer's position. See illustration 7 for the governor's circuit breaker with the engine room with the diesel light with the switch and the step swell light switch. Switch for the gauge side inside of the compartment. See illustration 7 ground relay cutoff switch inside lower and left hand section. Ground relay reset push button with the GR with the projection through the left frame with the relay equipment component cutoff switch inside of the upper and left hand section. Control air pressure gauge inside the upper right-hand section. Other engine room gauge for the control of the main battery switch located to the right side of the air compressor for the engine cooling, water temperature for the engine gauge, engine lubricating oil level of the bayonet gauge, control side of the engine lubricating oil temperature gauge, engine cooling, water level gauge, fuel tank level gauge under the engine compartment deck, the air compressor discharge pressure for the gauge, left side of the air compressor covering the air, the compressor lube oil level of the bayonet gauge, the air compressor lube oil pressure gauge, power, servo, motive, radiator, shutter, operation for the fan, motor for the control switch, the generator, air recirculating damper, the three-way ASL light switch to the left side of the rear of the door, emergency fuel tray panel with the opposite generator, shroud right side. Illustration 6 shows your compartment lights, engine manual light breakers, auxiliary generator, voltage red, battery voltage meter, control negative, control positive, auxiliary generator, and frosting. And all right, illustration 7. All right, FF is the fuel pump. FP is the fuel pump contractor. B is the battery change for the contactor. BC 1 and 2 is the brake contactor. To the REV with the reverser. SW the braking switch. O is the control air circuit. C is the control air pressure for the W1, 2, and W3 radiator fan contactors. P1, P1, 2, P2, P3 power parallel motor contactors. M1, M2, M3, M4 field shunting contactors. GS1 and GS2 engine starting contactors. CR2, CR3 transition relay equipment. S1. S2 series of motor contactors, 187 fuel pump circuit breaker, B unit only, 173 stop light switch, A unit only, 171 engine room, A light switch, A unit only, 123 governor circuit breaker, all units, GF governor generator field contactor, RC reverse current relay, CO motor brake contactor switch, X battery voltage regulator, 2 excitation panel, 1 relay equipment. Our control stand operating handles indicating the equipment general with the control stand, each of the A with the unit with the 3 operating handles, the V3 handles mechanically interoperative. Before attempting to move the locomotive, the engine must be thoroughly familiar with the movements of the must be familiar with the relation of the loading of the braking indicator, speed indicator, operating handle, reverse handle of the 3 position, forward, off, the reverse, the handle control of the direction of the locomotive, the unit, the selector of the off position for the 4 power operations position 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the left of the off, the dynamic braking control range for the right of the off. Alright, so here's your selector label, here's your idling position forward reverse, and then there is your notches dynamic brake ranging. Throttle handle with the 9 position, idle with each 8, the 8 running with the notches controlling the engine speed of excitation. Mechanical interlock between the operating handle with the reverser that cannot be moved with the forward with the reverse removed from the control stand unless with the selector and the handle with the off with the one with the end with the throttle and the idle. The selector handle cannot be moved from one or to the off unless the throttle handle is idle can be moved through the power operating position 1, 2, 3, and 4 with the throttle handle in the exemption any position except for the cannot be moved with the 2 and 3 or 3 and 2, 3 to 2. Throttle handle in this position 7 and 8, but the throttle must be reduced to the position 6 below these transitions. Selector for the handle cannot be advanced with the 1 and left with the reverse level of the order of reverse. It can be moved from the off to 1 to 1 and 1 to off with the reverse handle in any position with the reverse hand moved. The selector handle cannot be moved in the dynamic braking range except with the throttle with the idle with the reverse handle with the forward. The throttle handle cannot be moved with the idle unless with the selector handle with the 1 or above. It cannot be advanced with the reverse handle with the move. It can be advanced with the reverse handle insert with the forward, reverse, or off. Alright, this shows your illustrations 8 show the reverser selector and throttle handle. Reverser selector handle should give you the 1, 2, 3, 4 position selector for the power. Idle position throttle handle goes from 1 to 8 in the back, right to left. Dynamic braking is in between. And the reverse handle is the throttle. Throttle handle is equipped with the auto monitor which prevents the throttle from being opened with more than one notch. For the advanced throttle with the notch handle must be pushed toward the idle slightly with the pulled out with the next notch. With the movement toward the idle should be slightly subposition. Only because of the latch with the click with the control stand. If the throttle is retarded to move during the handle with the latch will engage and engage in the handle with the original notch with the throttle will not advance to the next position. When closing the throttle there is no restriction. The full movement can be made with the pausing of each notch. Alright, illustration 9, selector handle and latching. A, the normal fixed locked and hitch snatch. B, the lifted. C is overlap. D is handle drop. E is the slides. And F, the handle locked. This shows, the illustration 10 shows the selector handle sliding, latching slide view A and F, B and C and D and E. Alright, selector handle latching. The free travel selector handle without even the position with the two latches built with the handle with the definite sequence of the motion required for the move of the handle from one position to the another to any of each of the direction prevented the handle from being accidentally moved with the locomotive under the power of the pass from one position of the rate for the handle moved in the desired direction, lower the latch, strike with the far side of the notch with the very slightly move the drop the handle with the move toward the next position, reach for the upper latch for the drop of the notch with the stop of the movement and locking the handle. When making transition position 2 or 3 from the position of 3 to 2, it was necessary to have the throttle handle in the notch 6 or lower with a sense interlock with the prevent the movement of the selector handle when the throttle is in the notches 7 and 8. Selector handle move with the dynamic brake. For the application of dynamic brake with the selector handle is lifted with the latch position off of the move with the over the engine position with the slightly move of the handle with the direction brake with the B position with the laugh of the manner similar with the power position the letter B with the appear with the selector handle the window with the movement of the handle B with the established dynamic braking circuit. For the application of dynamic brake, the handle with the disengage with the B notch for the move with the right with the forward the dynamic braking effect with increase for the handle with the move forward with the B position. Therefore, there's no notch to the dynamic braking range beyond the B position. Handle can be moved freely throughout the travel. However, the range of the movement is usually determined with the reading of the point of the load braking indicated with C section 104. Alright, transition. As the locomotive speed increases, decreases with the electric connection with the traction motor with the chain with the maintain with the maximum drawbar with the pull and the drawbar pull and power outlet with the locomotive with the chains for one connection from the now that is called the transition. The locomotive can be covered by this locomotive equipped with the automatic transition described below on the locomotives with the manual transition chain with the manual movement of the selector handle. Okay, to the left you see illustration 2, the traction motor shows the 1, 2, 3, and 4 and ground generator series current with a fixed motor, shielded point, number 1 motor series. Then this is 4231G ground generator the shield point, number 2 motor series with the series parallel field shunted. C is a shield point number 3 motor parallel which goes 4231 generator field. D is the shield point number 4 motors in parallel with the field shunt 4231. So number 2 and number 4, and then they have the number your traction motor connections. Automatic transition, the device with the selector handle with the position placed in the position with the forward with the starting with the train with the chain with the traction motor connection with the taking the automatically predetermined locomotive speed without action with the engineer when it's with a 70 to 17 gearing the 72th axle the 17th traction motor premium with the 42-inch wheel with automatic transmission automatically following the speed number 1 to number 2 17 miles an hour, number 2 to number 3 22 miles an hour, number 3 number 4 number 43 miles an hour. Our supervisor control over the automatic transition for the range for the automatic transition can be limited to placing selector handle with the 4 power position for the automatic transition will then not advance between on the traction motor circuit that corresponds with the position with the selector handle regarding with the less for the locomotive speed. For instance, selector handle with the placing the number 2 position with the traction from the transition with the serial pedal with the motor field with the shun the number 2 the number 3 in parallel number 3 will not take place when the speed rises to 22 miles an hour. Alright, when the selector handle is the limit of the automatic transition range for the maximum locomotive power you obtain with the speed with the 17 miles an hour with the handle 1 and 22 the handle with the 2 position 4 3 and the handle 3 the traction motor the connection for the traction motor circuit breakers are set with the listed below with the number that each for the circle with the corresponding with the selector handle position for the traction motor hook up with the manual transition is used number 1 series parallel number 2 series parallel with the motor field shunted with number 3 the parallel number 4 the number parallel with the motor shunted. Alright, schematic diagram with the four circle with the shown in illustration 11. The speed transition indicator see illustration 12 with the illustration located in the second with the left side of the instrument panel with the power of the indicator of the locomotive speed with the transition position in two scales. The four is the speed scale calibrated miles per hour with the transition scale with the divided the number of the zones 1, 2, 3, and 4 with the indicator of the motor connection to the transition at the various speeds. See locomotive set section 104. Illustration 12 with the load braking indicator speed transition indicator load braking indicator on the left and the speed right speed and transition indicator on the right. Alright. Alright, load braking indicator of the T in illustration 12 of the illustration located on the left-hand side of the instrument panel with essentially AME with the two-scale band with the load scale band with the red zone with the high current with the end of the scale operation with the zone permitted with the while starting and accelerating the train. Yellow, you have the zone with the left and the right. Red, operation permissible for the period of the time not exceeding 1.5 hours. The white zone with the left and the yellow with the operating with the zone with the allowable continuous operation. No operating with the yellow zone with the accumulated with the time exceeding 10% with the total operating time will result in the shortened motor life with a higher maintenance cost with the dynamic braking scale. Inner band with the use only with the dynamic braking limit. The dynamic braking is operated for the train push with the again for the locomotive with the wheels driving with the traction motor instead of the motors driving the wheel of the train with the electronic connection accomplished with the moving of the selector hand with the B position, the traction motor converted with the generator, the motor with the gears, and the generator as the generators produce electricity dissipated with the resistor grid located near the top of each of the locomotive unit by the torque is required for the term of the motors when they are when they are generated with the wheels when the resist turning and thus hold the locomotive back. The locomotive in turn resists the push of the train with the drawbar with the receive the retarding force and brake force of the train. And converting the traction motor with the generator, the armature of the disconnect with the field winding with the armature driving about the wheel with the producing electricity field windings for the four motors with each of the unit connected within series. Energized by the output of the main generator driven by the engine idle speed movement of the selector handle throughout the dynamic brake with the range of the vary for the out of each of the main generator. Thus, the movement is selected for the turn for the area with the core currents passing with the traction motor field with the current consequently controls all amount electricity generated with the traction motor. Given the locomotive speed, the torque required to drive the traction motor depends on the current being generated, the braking effort, and decrease the traction motor to produce the more or less electricity. This is the movement of the selector hand with the control of the dynamic braking force of the locomotive. The pointer and scale with the load braking indicator indicate with the current being generated with the number one traction motor during the dynamic braking. The selector handle must be manipulated with the pointer. Means the white zone with the dial. The dynamic brake is also equipped with the pointer moves out with the white with the zone with the warning light at the right side of the instrument with the panel will come on. Section 104 with the illustration on handle with the dynamic braking. Alright, section 104. Alright, section 104, locomotive operation. Preliminary operation. The trailing A unit with a check to achieve the following switch of the handle with their in the proper position indicated with the control cap, with the critical grip with the generator field switch for the off control stand, throttle, idle, selector handle with the off position, reverse handle with the remove, the reverse air brakes handle with the storage compartment provided for the purpose of the rotary valve with the lap position, fire alarm, cab heater, defroster gauge light with the circuit breaker off and the hood of the compartment, train control, circuit breaker with off with the control with the rear of the unit with the motor generator, the fuel pump circuit with the circuit off with the main battery switch closed with the governor circuit breaker around with the control negative with the control auxiliary generator with the auxiliary generator voltage regulator with the light with the circuit breaker with onto the control compartment. The CML set of the radiator for with the proper position stamp up at the faster with the outside the temperature above the 75 to 80 degrees down to slow air temperature is lower. The open the door for the control compartment with the make sure with the traction motor cut out with the switch in the opening position. Handle vertically. See with the ground relay switch is closed. Press for the ground relay reset button with the ensure of the ground relay is reset with the check with the control air pressure for 70 pounds with the gauge to the right of the cabinet. See all the safeguards in place. See all the form material in such a way for the rags and tools, etc. have been collected. Remove all the shaft of the opening with the move of the parts, electronic components. The check the level of the gauge engine, the cooling system with the lubricating oil level of the engine air compressor. Q, check all the air compressor governor cock is open. The Q, make sure the air compressor the governor cock is open. 2. On the trailing unit, see the independent air brake with the set on the running position for the seal within this position, the holster switch with the off position light for the position, repeat the steps H through P of the outline and trailing unit A. Leading unit A with the receive the reverse handle with the insert with the out position with the throttle with the idle and select the out position insert with the brake handle with the K2 rotary air valve with the freight and passenger depending on whether or not the control of the emergency feature is desired. For the control circuit breaker with the generator fuel switch with the control stand or off, then snap on the on fuel pump with the cab signal with the circuit breaker with the control stand, snap on the on fire alarm to warning cab heated defroster gauge light with the circuit breaker with the hood compartment, snap on the train the controlling circuit breaker with the rear unit with the motor generators. Repeat steps I through P with the outline of the trailing unit A. Starting the engine, putting on the engines online, starting the engine, checking the overspeed with the governor reset with the engine with the power plant with the regulated reset with the necessary name. Necessary by the pulling of the lever to directly indicate with the nameplate with the limit with the travel the stamp with the fuel pump with which the engine control with the node with the fuel pump runs with the fuel oil pressure built up between 12 and 18 pounds with the gauge on the engine control panel. Turn the engine's control switch to the idle and hesitate momentarily to hold the push pull out the switch button to start position. Hold the knob in the start position until the engine fires at the speed sufficiently extinguishes the low oil pressure. Indicate that at this point the oil pressure should be approximately 8 pounds. Note the engine should start with the turning of the promptly when the engine control switch is pulled in the out and the firing with it should occur within a few revolutions. E. Engine does not fire. Release the knob and turn to the opposite position. Repeat the engine start. Do not attempt to start the engine repeatedly. As this will run down the storage of the batteries. 2. After the engine is running, see that the lubricating oil pressure is at least 8 pounds with the air compressor. The traction motor blowers are operating normally. Radiator shuts the normal position. There are no leaks in the piping, so for the proper voltage to obtain with the battery voltmeter. Repeat the items A through E through the engine and the other units. Multiplying the engine over the online. To put the engine online, the turning of the engine's control switch one position at a time to run. It comes in under the control of the throttle has been as the switch for the move the idle position. Repeat the operation for the other units. Final check. The bank of the final check over the operation for the lube oil with the fuel oil pressure gauge the preparing with the movement for a moving locomotive. Lead A unit is necessary for the turn the gauge light control switch to the control stand on. Hold the clockwise against the return spring with the pressure for the gauge light come on and release the pressure. See the air compressor for the maintain with the main reserve that the pressure for the 130 to 140 pounds. See the air brake equipment is properly set up on all the units. Release the handbrakes. Make necessary air brake test placed on the foot and safely control pedal before releasing the locomotive brakes. Test the air horns locomotive bell on the leading unit. Test the operation of the stand. Check close the generator field switch for the control circuit of the breaker on the control stand. D. Pumping and on up a train line with the main reserve pressure cannot be maintained with the charge of the train line. Proceed this file close the control circuit breaker with the control stand at the leading A unit. Leave the generator field switch off. The move of the reverse handle to the opposition. Place the selector handle in the position 1. Advance the throttle handle to the notch number 4. And once the notch at the time, one notch at a time. Caution: do not advance the throttle beyond the notch 4. For this, the operation never pump the air reverse handle within the forward or reverse position. Starting the train with the throttle handle with the idle position. Please select the hand with the position 4 with the automatic transition operation. Move the reverse handle with the forward reverse as required for the train movement. Caution: never move the reverse handle from one position to another unless the locomotive stands still, otherwise damage its equipment will result. When ready to start the release of the air brakes, wait until the train brakes are fully released, then brace the throttle and the notch 1. The locomotive does not move the advance the throttle one notch at a time until it does, and the traction motor will occur with the remaining of the stationary with the power applied with the prolonged periods. Power required to start the engine for the move of the loading braking indicator pointer in the red band. As soon as the locomotive moves, the throttle may be controlled and the train operation requires advance throttle with the notch time with the increased speed with going into the red zone when necessary to accelerate the train, using sand whenever necessary to avoid slipping the driving the wheels. If the slipping continues to notch over the throttle until slipping stops. Alright, 5. Notching off. Notching off should be, if possible, done with a notch at a time of the smooth operation. Select the shutting off the power, but the throttle might be closed regardless of the position of the selector handle. 6. Maximum speed. If located, locomotive overspeed warning whistle sound with reduce the speed of the make of the 15-pound forward stalling brake application for the 6 seconds. For the lack of such action will cover the emergency air brake with the application to be initiated. Power output the locomotive will be cut off at the speed of the diesel engine will drop the idle. F. Forestalling the automatic transition changes. Under certain automatic operating conditions, locomotive speed may be the automatic transition will change the back of the forward with any slight with the change with the grade with the action may be noted with be heavier with the load braking indicator pointer which will alternately show different route. The operation with automatic transition produced is unnecessary with the contact with the automatic transition equipment. The selector handle will be moved with the position corresponding with the left of the lower position to speed. The transition takes place. For instance, the speed transition indicator pointer is approximately one in line with between zone 2, zone 3 places. Selector handle position 2. Choose special instruction operation with the manual transition. Necessary to operate the locomotive with the manual transition for the name of the following instruction will apply with selector 1 of the starting of the train. Please select your handle the number 1 position starting the train. Same with the throttle handle with the operating with the given with the automatic transition. Accelerated to speed. As the train speed increase with the watch the speed with the transition indicator with the point move from the zone 1 to zone 2. Shift the selector handle to position 2. The speed further increase with the reach of the line between 2 and zone 2 and 3. Reduce the throttle notch to number 6. Shift the selector handle into position number 3. Return. Throttle notch A after making the shift of the selector handle position with the speed transition indicator across the line into the zone of the throttle is needed to be reduced. 3. The train speed decreasing due to the grade as the train speed with the fail of the grade for the Conditions make the selector handle shift in the reverse order to reduce the throttle to knot 6 when shifting from number the read to number 2. Caution: the selector handle must be kept in the numbered position with the same at the lower than other than the zone indicated with the speed transition indicator. The selector handle must never be allowed to remain in the position higher than the speed transition indicator reading, particularly with the important that the locomotive speed drops due to the grade of the condition, the action, the neglect of the serious damage of the traction motor will result with the select stopping the brake. With stopping the reducing locomotive speed, the air brake with the power applied with the power is left on the locomotive to keep the slack out with the applying with the brakes will slow down. You with the reduce the throttle while applying with the throttles must be with the idle with the locomotive stop. 2. Throttle with the idle stop with the certain with the throttle is in the idle position before the train cannot come to a stop during the stop of the continued application of the power of the traction motor, even when the shortened period within the stationary is very likely to result with serious damage. 3. Visual inspection at the stop of the time permits that during the stop of the visual inspection of the part of the locomotive detects any sign for the trouble to watch, especially with the hot journals, hot main motor axle bearing, with the hot armature bearing, with any of the fuel lube, oil with the water, air, steam leaks. Also check for the loosening of the dragging parts. Alright, dynamic braking. Establishing dynamic braking. When the dynamic brake is used, the close the throttle to the idle, with the return close the throttle to the idle, and then return the selector handle to the opposition. If it is in power operation position, disengage the selector handle, latching of the mechanism in the off position, move the lever toward the engineer position until the latch to the B position. Movement should be rapidly with the same manner as the changing with one position to another. If necessary, to feel that from position B, know that this movement in selector handle can be moved only with the throttle in the idle, with the reverse handle in the forward. The load braking indicator pointer should not show a light with the movement of the dynamic braking style. Disengage the selector handle to move it in the forward very slowly until the pointer moves up to approximately 100 amp of the braking. After obtained, at this point will be enough to bunch and slack, and then the selector handle should be not advanced in any other further, and the slack is bunched. Using the dynamic braking, when the slack of the bunch, move the handle slowly to the right with the handle to move the reading of the load, brake indicator to the right for the dynamic brake after with increase the braking, dynamic braking. The maximum braking is desirable to with the move of the handle, the point of the load braking indicator reach of the upper limit of the white zone. Do not allow the pointer to go in the red zone. If the braking after the maximum application is sufficient to slow down the train, the pointer will fall back to the train speed. Drop to maintain with the maximum brake after the continue with the movement of the handle to keep the pointer near the upper end of the white zone. The train speed decrease with the steady speed is desired rather than slow speed. Easy off the dynamic brake by offing with the handle brake back toward off until the train speed is steady with the edge that requires miles per hour. To hold the speed with the handle, keep on the moving slightly forward to the return of the train back to speed it up. On heavier grains, effect with the dynamic braking may be insufficient to hold the train. The maximum dynamic braking application pointed with the upper limit of the white zone with the train speed, with the increase of the train speed, with the rise of the load brake indicator with the pointer will go up on the scale of the 10 to move with the red area, with the keep the moving the handle back to lower the upper pointer over the white area. When the train speed comes up with the desired limit, the braking area brake application check of the train. Do not change the position of the selector handle if the speed has been reduced sufficiently. Release the air and allow the dynamic brake to hold with the train while the brake pipe is recharged. When the air brake apply, the pointer will drop back down after the release of the air. The train will gain with the speed, but assume with the great condition of the train, this will cause the pointer to arrive at the forward with the top of the white air. But when the pointer reaches the limit of the white zone, the speeder will again with the desired limit with another brake application, which should be made with the method for the handle with the maintain the nearly constant light with the speed of the air brake application are made with the will reduce this very slightly. Actually, it affects the light air application with the reverse. So we'll first show the movement of the low indicator point before the notice of the speed transition indicator drop in speed with us in the air is relief that soon with the load braking indicator with the lanes to fall back. Speed indicator will remain practically steady with after some of the practice of the judging of the frequency and the amount of the air application for the engineer will be able to descend with the grade of the constant speed and allowed with the maximum allowed speed with the materially lower the running time of the similar producer that will be used when the grade involved includes stretches where the speed is restricted because of the curve of the transition conditions by use the heavier application for the speed but can reduce the with the restriction after passing restricted relief of the air with allow the train to come up to the normal speed with the grade with where the pointer will again reach for the top of the white area, but the method will accomplish a smooth train handling in some respect for the graduate release after the most slowdowns. Warning: keep the locomotive with the brakes released with an automatic brake application that are made with a dynamic brake. In the use of the neglect of the precaution can also cause the wheels to slide in flat spots. Severe conditions grave with the tonnage may be encountered with which with a continuous full dynamic braking desire without any circumstances avoid the selector handle during the brake application for the keep of the pointer off the limit of the white zone while the train is gained speed after the release for the air. The ease off of the selector handle to prevent the pointer from moving up into the red hand zone. Handling requires the more manipulation and attention by the engineer and than necessary. If the dynamic brake is overapplied with the dynamic of the braking will indicate with the instrument panel with light. If these warnings occur, the ease off the dynamic brake and make it an air brake application to reduce the train speed. In either case, with the continue the action with the light goes out with the actuating point with the alarm system is normally set with the light with operate with the load braking with indicated point with goes approximately 30 amperes in the red zone. However, they're under No circumstances of the warning signal with the disregard, even if they should occur with the load indicator point that is in the white zone with the dynamic braking interlock that's provided to prevent the locomotive brakes from applying with the surface of the application for the made with the dynamic braking is used with the surface of the application initiated with the safety control of the train control function while the dynamic brake is in operation. The interlock will notify with the brake will allow the locomotive brakes to apply. Also, the locomotive brake can be applied at any time the use of the independent brake valve. They respectively the dynamic brake. This may cause the wheels slide. However, this must not be done except for the very low speeds covered below. The dynamic brake is not intended for the use of the bringing of the train to stop. The effect of the dynamic brake is diminishing the rapid speed drop below the approximately 19 miles an hour to 90 miles per hour. The dynamic braking effort is 50% of the 19 miles an hour at 5 miles an hour, approximately 25% with the zero with the stop the attached approach to the however if the efficient with the division distance available with the stop the sufficient of the desire to avoid the automatic brake application for some particular reason for the train to be slowed down gradually within the dynamic brake with the speed decreases approximately 8 miles per hour to move the selector panel toward the opposition, making a light application of the independent air brake which will prevent the running out of the dynamic brake release after the selector handle is off to increase the independent brake application to make the final stop. Warning: extreme care must be used under the above circumstances to avoid wheel slip with the apply of the independent air only when the dynamic brake becomes insufficient to prevent runout. Never apply the dynamic brake and independent brake together at the speeds over 8 miles per hour. Releasing the dynamic brake 3. With the dynamic brake should be made with gradually with the avoid runout with the train under conditions. Keep in mind with the dynamic brake has some of the same effect with the powerful independent air brake with the government accordingly. When releasing the dynamic brake, a light application with the independent air may be applied with the handle to move the B from B to off the independent valve, then slowly release the action to take them with the gradual grade condition with the such for the locomotive will pretend to run away with the form the train with the dynamic brake is released. Alright, Jay, stopping the engine, shutting down the engine, moving the engine control switch to dial position before stopping the engine, except for the emergency wave under the temperature of the drop is approximately 165 degrees. Stop the engine with the turning of the engine control switch to the off, the fuel switch for the engine panel. Can emergency stop all the engine for them leading unit, but indicate for the emergency requiring the immediate simulation of the stopping of all the power planes with the push the engine stop button with the control stand with the handle. The button should be used only for this purpose. Note that after the stopping of the engine, this manner will open the control circuit breaker with the leading of the A of the cabinet before the starting of the engine. If the breaker left closed, the engine control switches and all the units must be moved to the opposite simultaneously before any engine can be started. B. Snap off the fuel pump circuit breaker within the leading unit. A unit that stops all the fuel. 3. Moving the engine from the line engine to the unit can be removed from the line with the locomotive running at a speed with the throttle notch by turning the engine control switch to the idle position. 3. Returning the engine to idle. Engine can be put back on the line after being idle with turning the engine control switch to the run one position at a time. Slightly pause with the desire in each of the position to allow engine control and engine to come up to speed under load. In this case, in case the throttle is open, the engine comes up to speed with assume that it share of the load with the engine position engine control switch. Alright, 4. Shutting it down with the engine within the train motion. Engine can be shut down with the emergency with the stop push button with above with the overspeed reset lever for the control side of the engine. Normally at the engine stop with the turning of the engine control switch to the off. After shutting down the engine, snap the fuel pump switch to the off on the engine control panel. Alright, 5. Starting the engine with the train motion. Follow procedures outlined in paragraph B of the page 2 with the section when the dynamic brake with the U with the ability to turn the selector handle to the opposition position of the engine will being put online. 6. Shutting off all fuel in case of the fire and snap the L off of the fuel pump circle on the control stand. So shut down all the engine and push the emergency engine stop button at the engine position. Engine man's position. Pull the nearest emergency fuel cutout. Trip of the hand with each of the unit with the snap off the fuel pump switch for the engine control panel 11. L. Operating procedure. Reversing. Bringing the locomotive to the dead stop before moving the reversing hand from the opposite locomotive with the applying the power to the reverse direction before locomotive stops may cause serious damage to the traction motor. 2. The maximum speed. Never operate the locomotive over the maximum speed. 3. Operating through the water. Not operate the locomotive through the water more than 4 inches at the top of the rail with the speed but not exceeding 3 miles an hour. After passing through the water, place the generator field with the switch for the opposition reverse handle with the opposition. Place selector handle in position 1 operating up. Open throttle with the notch forward with the below. There's about 10 minutes. This will allow the water to dry off of the traction motors. For passing over the railroad crossing, when approaching the railroad crossing, throttle should be moved back below the notch of the 3 with the capital position until all the locomotives have passed over the crossing. This will minimize the position possibility of the traction motor flash over the cover of the brushing being jolted with off the communicator. M. The changing with the operating cab. The J. 1. Keep the engine running just before the time to change with the operating with the cabs arranged with the fuel pump circuit breaker to be snapped off with the new leading cab. The bill keep the engine off the running for the fuel pump circuit with the breaker snapped off. And number 2. Never operate with more Then one fuel pump breaker closed, except for the few seconds when the changing end. The new trailing cab of the selector handle, the handle position must be in the opposition throttle with the idle reverse handle to move the off and remove. Make a full surface automatic brake application. Return the brake valve to the lap of the clove with the double heading cock. Move the K2 rotary air valve with the lap position. Move the automatic brake valve handle to the running position. Move it. Move the independent brake valve handle to the release. Clove with the single line supply cock when used. Snap off the generator field switch for the control fuel pump with the cab. Signal cab heater with the defroster gauge light with the fire alarm warning with the train control circuit breaker with the make sure of the fuel pump circuit with the breaker that's on the new leading cab as in one before operating with the trailing of the cab fuel pump of the fuel pump breaker. New leading cab on the snap of this cab stick with the cab heater defrost the gauge light with the fire alarm with the train control circuit breaker with the open the snaggle line with the supply cock when used. We use the automatic brake valve with the independent brake valve handle to move the K2 rotor valve with the freight and passenger with the do in the class for the service supply with the reverser and the air brake handle with the leaving the reverse handle in the opposition. Move the independent brake valve handle to the full application position. Open the door heading cock move the air brake test the move H this is now ready to move the corners with the instruction moving the locomotive and leaving the locomotive temporarily with the engine idle with the absence for the before a short time play for the throttle in the idle position select the handle in the off position. Alright, place the reverser and the handle in the opposite. Remove the handle, open the generator field switch for the set of the independent brake with the note that the control circuit breaker may also be opened with the safety precaution. And the two leaving the locomotive for the layover. Shut down the diesel engine, snap off the fuel pump with the switch and all the engine control panels protected against the freezing if necessary, freezing the weather precautions. Move the reverse handle with the control stand plate for the storage box, snap off the control circuit breaker with the generator field switch at the control stand, set the handbrake with each of the unit, open the main rotary switch on each of the unit, re-railing. And generally, some of the cases of the locomotive can be re-railed with under its own flap of the one pair with wheels with one truck with the track of the using the re-railing frog. The power must be cut off the derailed wheels with the power supply with the remaining with the rails. One power with the power wheels at the off the turn of the motor control circuit with the proper position to cut off the motor driving these wheels. If one of the trucks is off with the turn of the motor cut off switch with the number of the corresponding to the motor turn, then that truck will cut off the second motor with the truck blacking out opening with the proper the P cannot contact with the control compartment with the black with the number open with the P2 contact with the cut off the number one motor with the P2 1 number is P2 and P1 and number 3 and P2 2 for the number 4. The brake should be set with a 10-pound with the air brake of the throttle handle, notch up cautiously for the locomotive. The will move very slowly. The will not slip back in the back throttle of the move. The idle the throttle must not be notched up for more than a few seconds at a time. Alright, P. Towing locomotive dead and trail move the reverser handle to the opposition move the control stand throttle the handle in the A unit must be in the idle selector on the opposition. Air brakes must be set up with the valves close, double the heading cock with the automatic brake valve to be removing the handle with the both brake valves. Alright, place the K2 rotary valve in the pass position with the dead engine cock handle with the number the D24 control valve must move with the toward the dead position. Provision made with the sealing of the necessary note. The dead heading of the B unit move with the dead engine cock handle with the D24 control valve of the unit toward the dead position. Protected against freezing if necessary. See the freezing weather precaution. Open the main battery switch. The top of the battery switch must be closed for the operation essential auxiliary operation. Auxiliary open all the possible circuit breakers and switches. This will keep the battery load in a minimum. Periodic inspection on the road and general observation each of the power plant with the road need to only be made operating with the scheduled permit then left the other instructions of the issue with the railroad. However, each of the closed operation normal running sound with the engine and enable the operator to detect any deviation through therefrom. Check out the following the abnormal operation. If any of the abnormal conditions, know that the trouble should be found with the corrective, if possible, engine tachometer, the fuel oil pressure gauge, the lube oil pressure gauge, the engine water temperature gauge, the lube oil temperature gauges. Lube oil pressure, no normal lubricating oil pressure for the throttle, not of the 8 or 20 pounds, 25 pounds with the SA number to number 30, with the oil with the 30 pound, 35 pound with the SA number to 40, oil idle. Idling speed lubricating oil should be above the 8 pounds. If the lubricating oil pressure falls below the safe figure at any of the engine ends, stop the alarm pressure for the sound throughout the locomotive. The yellow oil pressure for the alarm indicate the light of the A unit and the engine control panels all units. When this occurs, the turn engine control switch with the alpha, the snap of the alpha, the fuel pump switch to the engine control panel at the top of the engine for the investigating with the cause. If the cause is not readily determined for the power of the engine over to make sure if it's free before the starting warning. Never operate the diesel engine with a sufficient lubricating oil pressure, sufficient pressure. Fuel oil pressure for normally 12 pound, the 18 pound, the end of the gauge for the engine control panel. If the pressure vary above the low, the limits of report of the trouble, the correction of the battery charging the battery voltmeter pointer should be in the green band between 72 and 76 volts. Air compressor for the governor gauge. The air compressor for the governor gauge with the reading should be between 125 and 140 pound. All the units, according to the limits specified by the individual railroad diesel engine intentionally on the road. If any of the unusual sound that the smell is observed, investigate immediately. Do not change any of the power plant regulator, throttle adjusting settings. If any change with the other made, only experienced service personnel report the trouble or correction. The operating with the crew is expected to alert in the absence of the failure of any part of the engine should investigate and report any such developments. However, no duties and tests other than the routine inspection prescribed by the sense for the operation of the diesel engine automatic will start with the place in line with the automatic alarms are provided in both engine cabs and the engine room to indicate the lubricating oil pressure for the high engine for the cooling and water temperature for the high lube oil temperature low lubricating oil pressure that any of the unit will stop the engine. The high water and the oil temperature will reduce the power output of the unit with a concern of about 25%. Alright, P. Summary of the operating precautions. In all cases of the trouble, the abnormal condition, take the necessary precautions again for the injury to personnel and equipment. In this case, if the fire is near the fuel oil line with the fuel tank, quickly pull with the nearest engine fuel cut out the handle with the emergency. All power plants may be shut down with the simultaneously pushing the engine stop on the aim of the control stand, but immediately after snap off the fuel pump circuit breaker on the leading unit. The engine stop button will immediately shut down all the diesel engine. The fuel pump circuit breaker will shut down all the fuel pumps. All possible to proceed to each for the engine with the control panel will open the fuel pump switch, turn all the engine control switch to the out position. If the locomotive the unit will continue with the develop the power with the throttle handle with the idle with the throttle handle stick to the power not snap off the control circuit breaker with the generator field switch on the control stand with the power continue with the control circuit with the breaker with the pressure and engine stop on the control stand. The leading unit afterwards open the fuel with the circuit breaker with if necessary pump up the long train with the degree for the air compressor for the output with the reversing handle with the off the open the generator field switch. Please select your handle with the position one number. Notice for the notch on the notch up the throttle with the handle with the notch forward below. Then the towing of the unit with locomotive with the maximum train with the speed with the governor and the maximum speed of the towed unit with the other units observed with the precaution towing that described earlier. Alright, S. Electrical precaution. When the battery changing the voltmeter inspection with the rounds if you see the normal battery charging will take place. The circuit breaker with the trips that overload assuming the position approximately midway between the on and the off. It must be removed to the off position before they can be reset with the necessary to reset the trip. Circuit breaker with the first make certain with the circuit effective with this in an operating position. The circuit will reopen the remet the trouble to shut down with the effect of the apparatus. 3. Do not block the contact relay or circuit breaker with the 4. In case of the fire resulting from the grounds, the short circuit with the flash over the electrical circuit with the generator, the traction motor shut down the power plant at once and the insulation continue with the burn. Use the CO2 type extinguisher to put out the fire. Observe the traction motor and all operating all operating when the time locomotive is under power. Alright, operating with the motor 1 cutout. To cut the motor 1 out, any unit of the motor, move the throttle with the idle position to turn the motor cutout switch with the cut 1 cutout position with the cutout with the motor with the 1 with the trailing unit of the operating instrument will you expect with the reduce the available the horsepower with the start of track after the horsepower output with the engine will reduce the automatically with the power plant regulator. Each motors remain with the operation located with the approximately the same with the motor with the remaining with the other motor unit if the train is connected and content cannot be started. The engine must be reduced to help the service provided. The motor 1 is cut out with the leading unit with the load braking indicator with which is connected with number 1 motor circuit will not operate. No indicating will be obtained. To cut the motors 2, 3, and 4 out, clip the throttle handle to the opposite, then turn the motor cutout switch to 2, 3, and 4 cutout. Locomotive operation will be the same as the motor 1 cutout when the operating with the motor 2 and 3 and 4 cutout with the leading unit with the load brake indicator the position at standstill with approximately 2/3 of the automatic brake actually being obtained with the per motor with each of the trailing units. The carrier must be taken within the advancing throttle to prevent slipping the wheels of the trailing units. 3 motor may be cut out with the closing of the throttle with the leading of the unit to take effect of the power plant with the idle leading turn of the control switch to the engine control panel with the idle of the motor cut the switch for the being turned to cut with the desired motor. Put the engine back with the line with the turning the engine control switch to the idle and run it notch at a time. You are operating with 1 unit cutout. It becomes necessary to unload the top of the engine to turn the engine control switch to run to the idle to open the position at the at its one position at a time. This will remove the load from the engine, but this stop the engine, turn the engine control panel, control switch the off and on panel, fuel pump switch from the engine control panel. If the engine through the cutoff with the leading unit with no loading brake indicator operation will show, but the engine man must be relayed on the experience determining the operating equipment is being overloaded with the rider with the Navy station with the trailing A unit signal with the engine is overloaded with the condition that will occur with regardless where the engine is cut down with the alerted with the swift wheel slipping and overloads. RV, diesel engine precaution. They do not operate with the mechanical trouble of rotating of the reciprocating part of the engine. Report on all unusual sound of the action and part of the diesel engine. Diesel engine access for the electrical equipment that shut down the effective the engine. It is necessary to keep the diesel engine running with as continuous as possible. Shut down only in account with the trouble if the locomotive is inoperable for the more than 1 hour or 2. Do not attempt to correct the trouble. The making adjustment of the engine power plant regulator, temperature, or pressure switch of any control device trouble should be reported with the correction experience and service specialist. Report any unusual exhaust conditions observed if the trouble occurred during the freezing weather. It becomes necessary to shut down the engine, protect the equipment against the freezing, with describing the freezing weather precautions. W, with operating with the reducing diesel engine output, in case of the trouble, the injection system with one cylinder operating with the maybe continue with the cutting out of the particular injection pump. The effect of this in such case, the demand for the engine is reduced the proportion of the power plant regulator, the spring breaks, and either in the injection pump or the injection nozzle, the tube connections of the part leaks for the cut, and the injection pump continue to operate with the until the trouble can be remedied. 2. Pump the nozzle cut out with a disengage with the plunger guide with a fuel control rod from the control rack for the fuel and for the injection pump. Freezing weather. X. Freezing weather precautions. During the freezing weather, certain precautions must be taken with the safeguard locomotive equipment. The ice formation may hinder the operation of the radiator shutters. If the locomotive power plant is shut down during the freezing weather for the aim of the great time length of the time drain water system to the low level of heat of them that you may be used by the vapor Clarkson coil type heater. 1. Running. Engine cooling water temperature must be watched for the carefully to prevent any possibility with the engine overheating with the running of the low level. Recirculate with the generator with the air to keep the engine room warm from the open temperature with the ice form of the radiator shape of the room with the ice for the first opportunity with the operating during the freezing weather with the low level of the warning drain valve to be open with the valve to remain open. The opening the low level of the drain valve will drain the water from the expansion tank will permit the radiator to drain the lower of the water tank when the engine is stopped. 2. Shut down the freezing weather. It is necessary to shut down the engine while the locomotive is in route with the freezing weather for any of the reason protected against the freezing as follows. See how the radiator shutters are closed. Open the low level valve. Open the valve 8 with the C-figure 1 to start with the vapor Clarkson coil type heater with the closing of the switch on the panel. Open the number 4 valve. Open valve 4 to emit the hot water with reheating the coil into the hot toilet water tank. And the A units only open the valve 2 for the supply of the hot water to the cab heaters. Make sure that all the control valves are open at the cab heaters to allow circulation through them. Note if the fire fails to start the coil type heater when the switch is closed, make sure the manual of the fuel bypass valve is fully closed. Adjust the fuel key metering valve until the fire starts. Further adjust the valve to obtain the best stacking conditions. 3. The change indicate the coil type heater the inoperative to move not available to any reason. The water system should be drained, but the following the procedure: drain all the cooling system without opening of the drain valve provided with the piping system. Remove the lower drain plug for both exhaust manifold water jackets adjacent to the number of the 10 cylinders. 2. Drain plugs on the underside of both the exhaust L water jackets. 2. Drain plug on the water inlet header nameplate number 1. Drain plugs on the bottom of each of the water pump number 2. Alright, drain plugs on either side with all the oil cooler heads. 2. Empty water treatment devices if used. G. And drain the toilet water tanks. And E. Drain the cab heaters. This shows the picture of standby heating arrangement. Now the HP heater of the pump. HP heater 1 provides the pressure for the system operated 1. Check the valve to give the unidirectional water flow with the B. The globe valve with the regulation of the amount of the water flow to the cab heater for the A units only. 3. Global valve and drain the valve for the system. 4. The global valve regulates the hot water flow with the water storage tank. 5. The global valve drain with the valve of the system. G. Global valve drain with the valve with the water storage tank. 7. The check of the valve to give the unidirectional water flows. 8. The global valve prevents the circulation of the system when the engine is running. Alright, operating instructions for the train communication equipment. Operation: turning the train communication equipment on and off the equipment operating with the toggle switch of the control switch band with the shift of the pilot light and fail the switch and fail light switch in the on position for the taking the test that should be made with another train phone unit with to determine whether or not the system is in serviceable condition. The light may be burned out or they may be failed to indicate the properly selector. Lever S for the channel selector to move the lever left to the H, and then right to L to select the channel and describe the transmission reception when the handset with the move removed from the hook with the S lever to move with the file with the right on the left of the position. Select the desired channel left with the lever automatically locks in position. Channel selected with the compensation on the handset with the return with the normal neutral position in which the handset is replaced on the hook. When the selector selected is located at either of the channel position, they do not attempt to transfer to any other channel unless the handset hook which should depress the release for the magnet lock. Holding the lever in position mechanically above may damage the last of the mechanism to prevent the proper locking with the selector valve. To talk, move the handset with the hook with the hold on the side of the head with the same manner of the regular telephone. Move the selector level to the S to L to or to H to connect with the handset with the proper connection channel for the talking. When the talking is necessary to hold down the press for the talk button. And after talking with this button, it should be relieved immediately to the side with the equipment. For reception, after the channel selection is made with the load speaker with it automatically connected to the opposite channel with the one to which the selection was removed. This provides the emergency call with the reception through the loudspeaker. The adjustment with the one with the control panel with include the two volume controls on the handset with the other loudspeaker with the turning into the clockwise direction will increase the volume of the sound from the handset receiver with the loudspeaker. There are also two noise suppressor controls for each L and L channel. The volume controls the handset with the loudspeaker with the volume control should be adjusted to point where the volume is insufficient with a good reception. No, not too loud with the cover the distortion and noise with extreme loud talk is no benefit to the transmission. In fact, the server will only distort the conversation. Noise suppressor for the control of the H and L channels are for the purpose of adjusting the train communication receiver with that's the operation condition November 1947. And this shows a picture of your train. Okay. And this was the Fairbanks Morse diesel electric locomotive.